Yeah, thanks, Dan. Hello, everyone. Uh, my apologies for being late. We had a small issue with the streaming service, but we're up and now, and it seems like people are coming in. Feel free to comment um, in the chat room. At half of the hour, I'll start addressing some of the questions or statements in the chat box. So let a couple people gather. People are coming in now. We're on step 4. Elisa, hi, Harry. I like that logo, Harry. That's pretty terrifying. So, guys, maybe we can slowly do a quick review of what's happened over the last 2 weeks and what we've been discussing. Um, we're discussing the first 4 steps, and tonight we're going to talk about writing an inventory. But so far, we've admitted that we have progressive and fatal disorder, addiction, be it alcohol, fentanyl, crystal meth. We know this to be a fact. If some people we discuss maybe the neurological explanations of what needs being met there helps us cross the bridge. Other times it's just the desperation of our entire cognitive life failed, or use is the immediate problem and it's going to kill me and I've given up. And this could get me to step 2, coming to believe that a power greater than myself, ourselves, can restore us to sanity. And we were clear there's a distinction on what sanity is. It's not a psychiatric term. It's predominantly a legal term, stating you don't know true from false. And in the context of alcohol or the drug of our choice, we do not know true from false on our own. And the big book cites 2 examples, and they don't talk about the madness of active use or the tragic or horrifying things we may do under the influence. They talk about a peculiar mental blank spot that could happen to us after going to treatment for 30 days and 3 weeks later, drinking for one night, or realizing you got a check and there's enough money in your bank account, it's safe to drink. Some trivial, crazed reason will arise where we look defenseless to the relapse. So we're admitting that in step 2, as we're realizing we might join a recovery community, be it NA, AA, and continue to step 3. Procedurally, what's step 2 look like? It looks like going to a lot of meetings, making a friend, and then into steps 1 and 2 kind of is this oath to yourself, your innermost, deepest part of yourself, that you don't want to die of addiction, and you have it. Step 3 is that I'm going to commit to the community and the way of life that the steps are presenting, even though I might not know where this is going to end or what steps 4, 5, 6, 7, what does this look like? I'm jumping in, and you hear the words faith a lot of times, and that word itself put me on my heels, because I always associated faith with the subscription to something supernatural. A is not taking that position. A is saying faith is the same word as fides, Latin. It's trust. Can I trust that I could recover the same exact way that the person in front of me did? Did I use the same exact way? And if I can make that commitment, they want me to take a look at a new idea of what addiction is. And they want to break it down into these 4 tiers of a personality. What has happened to my personality? And they stop talking about drinking and they start talking about character defects. And the first one I want to confront, step three, was selfishness. And this idea that maybe I don't know myself. Maybe there's a part of me that is asleep. If I'm going to have a spiritual awakening, where am I asleep? I go to work, I've lost the job, wherever you are at in your life, there's a part we have consciously had no intention with our life. And the times we did have intention and we thought we were good or charitable, is there an operator in the back just working things to get me to my next pleasure and addiction? So it's this consideration, this confrontation. Am I who I think I am? And if I'm willing to look at that, maybe I'm wrong. I'm ready to do step four. And they offer a prayer in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a commitment to another human being, that you are going to relinquish yourself of this idea of self. I want to know exactly who I am. And that's where we're at tonight. And it says fearlessly, we're going to take an inventory of ourselves. And why would we have fear? Because this inventory is going to expose my fantasy life, the ego. Um, so looking at step four, it's really procedural to look at mainly at fears and resentments. I looked at the idea of selfishness in step three. Now I'm going to consider, do I have a pattern of thinking? I've been asleep with that kind of take the form of resentments. Resentments being, an unsettled emotional life, resentiment. I'm refeeling my life. And this happens to people who've experienced trauma. Not so much a traumatic event, even if that's the case too, but trauma as your emotional life has just collapsed. This could come as a result of detachment, a sense of security, maybe lost or never developed in childhood. So from that stems this idea of resentment. I'm refeeling a life. I'm projecting even on new relationships, old resentments. I'm making patterns. And we're going to talk about a real simple way to write this. Fourth step. There's a lot of great things out there. If you Googled fourth step workshop or worksheets, you can see kind of a guide. But let's take a look at the idea of resentment. They're going to say we're going to look at people, institutions, places that we feel have wronged us. And now we get a chance to tell our story. So we write their names. And I'm going to just take up a simple one for now. And if you guys brought one, that was your homework from last week, was to find a resentment. And if you went to a meeting, I hope you found a petty resentment. Let me see. Okay. Oh, trippy. Sorry, guys. Let's take that down. Psychedelic Ford steps. Whoa. That's where I want to go. Sorry. Give me 1 second, guys. I jazzed that up. All right. Okay, here's a simple way to look at one. Why is it? Oh my! Can everyone see that, or does that look like psychedelic again? Angus. I think you could see that. So, okay, here we go. Angus is a resentment, like a made up resentment. I always use that word because I've still haven't met an Angus at an AA meeting. So I thought that would be safe. Angus, he's a real card, but let's keep it simple. So you're writing resentments. You've gotten this far, and the book gives you, it could seem, I don't know, hard to navigate reading Alcoholics Anonymous book, the book alone. trying to see this? Because it's not written like something Hazleton would present. But to stay precise with, let's consider what Alcoholics Anonymous is saying. I am resentful at Angus. So Angus goes to tons of meetings. He's a quasi old timer. You see him at every meetings, but you've been going to meetings long enough. Angus is kind of annoying, and he really shares a lot. And sometimes he even double dips. He's got the perfect advice for all the wrong moments. So he dominates the meetings, and they want you to consider things this is affecting, and it's ambitions, security, self-esteem, personal or sex relationships. Him dominating the meeting affects my ambitions, and we could see why. But we're going to put in parentheses there. You see in the big book, it says fear when we have ambitions and self-esteem. So there's a fear attached to this resentment before we even write out our fears. Angus never puts money in the basket. That kind of bothers me. This affects my security. I mean, am I always going to be paying for everything? What if nobody pays their fair share? Am I a sucker? Kind of annoys me. Let me consider this idea. Angus always corrects people, edits what they say. This affects my self-esteem. I don't want anyone doing that to me. And A is not a great format for debate. You never get a rebuttal. It looks weak when you're the first one to share and you get attacked. What are you going to reshare? This isn't fair. Angus creeps on the young people and he gossips. This affects my personal relationships because what if people believe Angus? He's kind of an old timer and he's gossiping about me. Angus doesn't like me. I know it. I don't like the way he's always giving his number out to the young people. I've seen this move before. He's kind of creepy. What's he up to? So this is Angus. This is a petty resentment. This is how fast I make judgments and think about people. And this is what we want to consider how fast our conscious life is in this form of resentment. Now, writing Angus is easy because there's nothing at stake. This is not a boss, an ex-lover, parents of someone who's committed a harm, an unjust harm to you, someone who's ripped you off, a business partner that betrayed you. Angus is just a little resentment. Let's see. This gives us a chance to see where the 4 steps taking us with a resentment. So if you look in the big book, they have this idea of fear attached with self-esteem. What does that mean? So if we take Angus and match him up with the effects, ambitions, we just write this out in a tablet. What's the real fear? I'm afraid. Well, what would you be afraid of? Angus didn't cause the fear, did he? But I could feel it. These things happen so quickly. I'm starting to see patterns in me. I'm afraid I'm not important or that people will ignore me. Angus didn't cause that fear. You squeeze an orange, you get orange juice. These fears are in me. They've been in me. Angus is reminding me of something I already think about myself. Security. I'm afraid I'm a sucker with money. I'm also afraid I will end up alone and broke. This is how I've approached my financial life. It's been a disaster. For some people, it isn't. But that idea that I'm emotional about my security, my material life, my social status has always been tied into my addiction. Can I recognize this as a fear? So if Angus also affected, I felt my self-esteem in line. I don't want Angus correcting me. I'm smarter than Angus. What if the whole room believes Angus? My fear is people don't like me. People might be smarter than me. I have nothing to say. Angus didn't cause this in me. He's reminding me of it. My original hurts, my original trauma and pains. Angus creeps on young people and he gossips. This affects my personal relationships. What if he converts all my friends in AA, lets them know I'm a fraud, I'm phony, fake spiritual person, and he gossips. And young people, what if they're attracted to Angus? Like, my real fear is I'm going to end up being alone, and that I'm undesirable. Do I have to act like Angus to find romance? Oh my God, this is awful. This is gross. These things are in me. So the fourth step's giving you, it's kind of tricking you into seeing these things as something that's not happening to you. It's been happening. And when we come to terms with that, we can see there's harms attached with these resentments that we're going to have to consider only our side of the story. Angus isn't the problem. That column becomes irrelevant. I am resentful at. And the cause is as far as I got with my addiction. I could find allies my entire life with resentments. But now we've told a deeper part of the story in the third column of what it's affecting, these core things that make me human: my ambitions, my sense of security, my self esteem, my social surroundings, my friends, my family, my romantic life. So Angus is such a threat at a meeting to a guy like me with addiction. I'm there 10 minutes, I'm already affected by a stranger. As I write these resentments, I start to see a pattern of my life. This is what's been blocking me. This is the prior condition and the conscious life of a person who suffers from addiction and alcoholism. And resentments can tell the story that way. We do the same things with our fears. It says in the book, even if they're not attached to a resentment. So we'd say, I am afraid of, nuclear war. Cause: I watch the news too much. I'm connecting the dots. This world's out of control. We're spending so much on this. This affects my fears, my ambitions. Now, some of this, you can make an argument it's going to be, this is kind of true. But what is it doing to your life? What's it doing to your family life? My fears are unmeasured and out of control. Bill always associates his fears, they were the corrosive thread weaved throughout his entire life. I have the same thing. If you could show hands almost how many people suffer from an anxiety disorder, it's one and the same for me with my addiction. I'm speaking for myself. They're in a love affair of they're intertwined. This constant background noise and tension of inadequacy that's just been humming in me. The fourth step is allowed me to confront it now as resentments of an unresolved emotional life. And you can find, at first, the trick is step 2 and 3, you'd like to find a sponsor, someone you trust, maybe a therapist, especially consider that if you've lived through a traumatic event or you've been harmed with physical or serious emotional trauma. You might want to look to have a licensed therapist in this part of your recovery. From that point, you could begin to write in that simple manner. There's great guides. Russell Brand has the backgrounds in the back of his, if you Google search this. But the real key is the relationship with your sponsor. If you trust them, try to follow and trust the guide they're leading you with. There's no, this is the perfect fourth step. There's the OG fourth step of AA that we went over. And I want to just take a little departure from that. And I will answer, I'm going to put my email out there tonight. I will answer and guide anyone through the fourth step that needs help. But how I wrote my fourth step, I've done them that simple with those columns and had the discussion. But I took it a step further because, as I told you, I've had 3 periods of sobriety in my life. And this last time around, I wrote one resentment at a time. And why I'm saying this, if there's someone that's in here tonight that has relapsed or has had experience working the steps and feel, oh my God, are these mute now? Are they not going to be effective the second go around? I wrote one at a time. And I have a handout. If you email me, I could give it to you. The big book continues after telling you how to write that procedurally. It says there's a place where we might take a sexual inventory if we've had a selfish conduct going on here. And that's on page, oddly enough, 69. Not sophomore joke. But the second paragraph says, we reviewed our conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate? I wrote that question out with each major resentment and I answered it, handwritten it. What else did I have to do besides recover my mind back from addiction? I took my time doing it. So this helped me tremendously. And I met my sponsor once a week with a major resentment. And we wrote it down. I did a fifth step, and I'll show you over the next couple of weeks, 6, 7, 8, 9, on one resentment at a time. It was something I could bite off. They were serious resentments, and they were emotional, and they were financial. So I wrote that out. Whom had we hurt? And my sponsor led me through it. He's an old school. How many people were harmed by this resentment? On average, one resentment, say an old business partner, 6 to 8 other people were harmed by my resentment, involving them in this drama. The time I stole from my family and my home life, plotting revenges or being in a bad mood. Don't you understand the stress I'm under? I couldn't leave it at the door because my mind was corrupted by this resentment, and I wanted to solve it with my ego, not my soul or my heart, because I've been so out of touch with it. So I had to write who I harmed. Those people were going to get amends. So I'm seeing this pivot of owning my own behavior in this writing. Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Yeah, of course. I had to get people to not like my resentment and help me. I'm sick. Were we at fault? What should we have done instead? Here's a pivot that you see on page 69 that's prepping you for steps 5, 6, and 7. What should we have done instead is imagination. In this imagination, they're already prepping you at step 4 to start considering an ideal of who you want to become, or maybe returning to a person addiction robbed you of being, or the integrity that you could not hold, even though you knew you should. We could think about these things now. We got this all down on paper. So they're saying we write this down. Now, it looks like it's associated with the sexual inventory, but I do it with my resentments because I've been around AA a long time. And if you're like me, we have complex brains. And if it's a real resentment, I want to really consider what I'm not seeing, and I want to be free of it. So in this way, we try to shape our ideal. We got this all down on paper and took a look at it. And that became kind of the discussion in my fifth step. So it was more scripted and structured. How do we confront dishonesty in step 4? It has been dishonest for me to believe that we put the resentments. Here's where the prayer is, the 4th step prayer. Angus can hurt, threaten, or injure my self-esteem, ambition, security, and personal relationships. I do this to myself. That's a spiritual axiom. Then we could say another prayer. If you believe in God or you're secular, the consideration, Angus is a sick man. How can Joe be helpful to him? And if I talk to Angus, I'd find out he's just as lonely as I am. He has an AA persona, but he really wants to be a good guy. This is just a scenario I'm creating for the effect of understanding what the 4th step's doing. It's opening my empathy. And I'm writing these in a language that A is setting out, or NA, to do this. Most people find workbooks helpful. If I could be of any help showing you those simple tasks, but this is what the 4th step's doing. It's exposing a pattern of my mind. Believe it or not, I've lost control in thinking this way. And the deeper I go in the stages of addiction, the bigger the victim I become in this written out 4th step in my own narrative. And I have to be free of this resentment, fear, and dishonesty. So we do the same things with the fears. And sometimes there's a column for harms. If you do your fears and resentments, there might be harms where you've hurt people, but you don't resent them. So I hurt Angus, say in another scenario. The cause, this affects, because I don't want anyone to find out. What would people think of me if they knew I did a harm to this person that's never been exposed? This is where we go all the way to find out how awake we want to be. And it's not a step you just do once. This is a consideration I do throughout my sobriety. If a resentment doesn't go away for two weeks, it's I kind of on the year, write 3 or 4 resentments, 5 resentments. Amends have to be made. But let's open this up for comments to talk about any details because it's kind of discussion based. And I hand wrote that just to give you the consideration that you got to just grab a tablet. You can start writing this. And if you feel a little lost, you could consult with me at any time, email me, and any support I could give you, I'm on it. Okay. My husband, when you're writing your fourth step, um, yeah, I would find a secure and safe place. And, before you share these things with somebody, keep your fourth step if you're living with other people safe, somewhere secure. And if you write the most crucial harms and painful things, you might want to consider writing it right before you meet your sponsor, because these are serious things we could be writing down. Hi, Chris. Thanks, Chris. I need it every day too. Let's just anyone who came in late, fourth step, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Question from Akiva. Joe, how do we define resentment and how does it differ from fear and judgment? So resentment, it's to refeel, resentiment. It's this. It could be anger. Say if I refeel, I have a resentment. I grew up Catholic. I have this resentment that brewed in me of the Catholic Church. Why do I feel it when I go into a church and no one's harmed me in there, and I'm already just brewing over, this place, that's resentment. It's without objection or reason. It's starting to pollute and be toxic in my mind, and it always puts an addict in a position where I can't self-soothe myself. I don't have this ability, and this resentment, this form of thinking, becomes the catalyst to justify why I need alcohol, and why alcohol and cocaine were so profound to my dopamine levels. I cannot produce this myself because my cognitive mind, it's in 90% of its real estate is these stories of resentment in my head and my fears. And what does it differ from fear? The resentment is it's the beginning of the narrative where I've been harmed or I've hurt someone. The fear is, this inadequacy I don't want to admit to in the first phase, that someone's affecting my self-esteem. No, they're just jerks. But the fear is, can I admit that this is how I feel without the resentment? And the judgment is, is my ego and myself going to be exposed as a fraud? And then it could go into morbid judgment. Well, I was never no good. I can't write this. It's just never going to work out for me. This morbidity, which is self-centered. So what can happen in the fourth step? I like this question, Akiva, is that you could become curious and a little removed from the pain. If you're starting to have a spiritual awakening and you made a real commitment in step 3, you can take a look almost at this resentment and these fourth steps as a stranger. So that's the fearlessness, because the ego's fake. I don't want to go back into the ego. I just saw it exposed in step 3 and I'm writing it down in 4. I don't want to go back into this fake Joe. I want to confront it with the writing and in the 5th step. So I could depart from judgment and start to have hope, continue that feeling of hope to be someone new. Some of mine are really deep. I don't want to put them on paper, but I know it has to be done. Lisa, that's an anxiety I understand and I could appreciate. And if you feel you don't have a safe place to put it, When you're ready to do your fifth step, write them, ask your sponsor or your therapist if these are deep harms that are really, maybe you can write it with someone else in the room with you, your sponsor, and ask them if they could take an hour while you finish them and read it to them. Some people burn their fourth steps. I kept mine or I clipped the names because you're going to need it. You'll see there's a trick. But the cause section you could get rid of. But find a safe and secure place, and maybe you don't have to do it alone when you're writing those things. Yeah, I do because my dad, Ashley Duncan, what is your thought on including people who have passed away on your fourth step? Um, yeah, I've had philosophers. I'm such an egomaniac. I've had fights with philosophers, but my dad's dead. But he talks to me every day. Myself, I could hear him whispering in my ear. We live with ghosts. We're alcoholics and drug addicts. This is sentiment. Yes, definitely. The confrontation's real in your head. People could still live, and closure can be brought to them. But it begins with writing it down. I don't want to go too far ahead of us in the steps, but you write it down. You write the cause and the effects, because when you consider some people, and I do, um, that I've grieved or resented, emotions come up. I want to reconcile this, and I want to find closure in it. But definitely. Um, Kiva. So essentially, any scenario that still plays a negative emotional response would be a resentment and would warrant a fourth step. Absolutely, absolutely. I think people, especially males, we think it's anger. This guy got me. That is a resentment. But you know, grief was a scenario I had to write down. I didn't resent my sister. I loved her very much, and she died at the end of my addiction. I wrote this down, this consideration, but I wrote it almost as a harm because I wasn't fully present in a way that the integrity I would want to have would allow me. And I wanted to reconcile that so I didn't get morbid, and then I could find something that would give me closure to that harm. So sometimes I write them as a harm. I've harmed so and so. And then the last question we were saying too is, where was I at fault? What should I have done instead? And I like that, Akiva, because these scenarios that have a negative emotional, I want to create a new ideal when they happen. And the ideal can't be, it comes in the lines of, can I be useful to other people if this kind of crisis or pain arises again? Can I consider someone else? Can I be helpful? Am I going to just focus on my own pain if I could find closure in this? But yeah, watching you through YouTube. Hi, Brian. My sponsor wants to go through the fourth step very methodically. That's great. My sponsor did too. But my sponsor is a fundamentalist, and I appreciate it. I liked it. I needed it. It felt more articulate, answering all those questions in handwriting. But individuals, and I've been around AA for a long time, I've known guys that needed, other people helped them write their fourth steps they couldn't read. So there's an individual process to this. We're all writing it down, but some need more details. It's finding the sponsor you trust and going through them. Let him take the lead with you. He could show you. So that's great. I'm all for that. But I'm also not a fanatic. I think there's a lot of great guides. NA has a great guide. Refuge Recovery, I've been going to online. It's helped me explore my spirituality. They have a great inventory process that's kind of methodical too. The point is, we have to take and examine life. This is where our addiction lives. It's an unreconciled life. Mark, Father Boriosi, I feel here comes resentment. Resentment comes from Latin, resentire, which means to feel again. And that's what it is. We want to live in the moment. And this scenario, writing the fourth step, compiles heaps and heaps of evidence that I haven't been present. I've been in a fantasy life or my past, or if you're anxiety like me, I think of horrifying scenarios, thinking it's prepping me for the trauma that's lying ahead for me because I've had a life of just things that could cause PTSD. I'm waiting for the new ones. Let me think of horrible things while I have time to smoke this cig. And my emotional life and my imagination, I heard a guy say at a meeting once, his first addiction was his fantasy life. My fantasies run so deep that resentments come out of them. Or I have the big book addresses it, real or imagined harms. I get so muddled in there. I'll run into someone and I'm thinking, why don't I like that guy? Because I had some fake argument with him in my head. Like, this is, my mind's out of control. And that's why I'll take these irrational risks in front of everyone where I'm relapsing and using drugs, is because I need relief from this situation. And we have to be honest about it. And if we've done enough prep in the first 3 steps, that could take a month, 6 months, a year for an individual. Consider going all the way then, and then following up with a fourth step. There's so much freedom in my part. Most of my fourth step was people who have passed away. I've heard many different opinions on this. I totally agree. Thanks, Joe. Thank you. What's your take of putting God and yourself on a fourth step? Myself is, it's hard. It's an exercise. I mean, I'm not going to knock it, but I didn't do that. The consideration is myself this whole time, my cognitive process that has failed me and has left me in this torment. But it's funny. I'm going to check one real quick. This is my fourth step from this year. And I got writing through a lot through the pandemic. Like, this one's on smoking. This one's on Akiva would like this. This one's on I am resentful. How did I pray? Evolution, social Darwinism, modern spirituality, i.e., secular. And I wrote this. I wrote this scenario out. This is my idea of God. I couldn't write God. I didn't know which God, but then I have ones on religion. Flushing these out, put them in measure of what I was risking to not be part of a community. And it was a personal resentment. And I personalized these large ideas, or I've been hurt by someone that as a child represented God, or let down on disillusionment. Maybe I lost my faith, and it's paused my life. It's paused my growth and curiosity because the pain was so real. And to admit that vulnerability to someone is a spiritual awakening. You will search with endearing, honest, sincere curiosity. You become alive again. So yes, definitely, you could definitely measure that idea, because you start to flush out, how did I personalize this? You find out where you've been hurt and how you can make amends, or by doing something more, fulfilling, and feeding yourself spiritually. Michael, I found that without stripping the anger out of the equation leaves me in the same spot, emotionally confused. Without it, I appear to be fluid, thought, and really attack the issues. My question is there enough, or should I address the anger as well, not only its roots? It's the fourth step's to start. Fourth step's this non-professional help between a community. Traditionally, that's how it happens, between you and your sponsor. I did this fourth step. I don't resent my wife, but I was, under the pressure of the pandemic, early sobriety, we're having bickering. The bickering's turning into a silence. My moods were irrational, Mike. I could relate to that. I did a fourth step. I made amends to my wife. I changed a new ideal, what I wasn't considering about how out of control my mind was. I ended up taking it a step further. I went for some therapy, and that helped too. So yeah, sometimes this is the first step for people in AA, kind of to take this approach, but it doesn't have to be the only one. So you got to be open to both options as well. So that's a great question. Thanks, Chris. Lisa, I guess the fourth step is kind of like cleansing. Once you get it off your chest, then you can feel the weight is lifted and can start to find yourself again. Yes, but I hedge that a bit. The fourth step in itself is not about relief, it's about reality, a consideration of how much I edit my own reality in my head that has killed my empathy or its accuracy. There's this confrontation of how I edited things in my head, or seeing how much power the entire world has over me and my social structure. It's because of this pain. But it should create a momentum and a motivation to be prepared to make right wrongs. There is a great relief in the fifth step for a lot of people. I didn't have that my last time. I had a deeper, healthy sense of regret and was motivated to go to my ninth step. Let me see. Well, a lot of great questions, guys. Thank you. Ryan, to take a while. Should I trudge through or find a sponsor to go through more quickly? I always suggest having a sponsor, but if you feel you're at the fourth step, um, it's tough. A is designed for a friend and a guide, not so much a power based. But if you can't find a sponsor in your area or online, I'm going to put my email out there. If I could be any of help or assistance, at least help you start writing it or have a chat. Find a sponsor though, and at least they could. You're going off their script of how they wrote it, either classic AA, maybe they used a workbook. Trust them. If you get along with them, you appreciate and admire their sobriety. Jump in, but it's good. It's something very difficult to do without a sponsor. Let me put my email in there. Hopefully, I typed the right one in this time. Here's my email: Akiva at Avenues. Any questions, considerations? I'll get into them. I'll try to respond to them by the week. Anywhere I could help, please don't hesitate to email me, guys. Is there any way to do a fourth step alone, or does it need to? I think your first pass definitely have the support and guide of a sponsor of calls. You might be writing something that can bring up trauma or pain. You want to call, or it gets confusing because the first two times you write, say you're doing one at a time, the class that way. Um, you want some validation that you're writing it the right way. But as you've been in sobriety for a long time, I just write resentments on the fly, and I call someone. I've done fifth steps with my sponsor. I've done them with friends of support. I kind of go to different people for different topics that I'm comfortable talking to them with, and I know not only do I share their ideals, I want their ideals. I admire um, the way they've gone through those scenarios, and I've been lucky to get some good guidance. But let's talk about the entire intent. In 1938, this book was written as if the Evening Post Gazette was going to have a flurry of like mail requests to have this book mailed out to people. So it was written in the point of view that you would be reading this without support. The original text of Alcoholics Anonymous, trying to fumble through these steps by yourself, and then eventually have the 12th step to go and make recruits. So, I mean, you can't be without hope if you're alone and you have to do this. It's just an idea that's in there historically. How we have to think of the luxuries we have today and support through how many meetings, different types of meetings, different types of people, unbelievable treatment centers in 30 days that address not only nutrition, sleep, begin the idea of identifying immediate problems, employment. We've come a long way. How do you know when you're done or it is continuous? Well, it's funny, Justin. The measure is, say it's your first round of a fourth step or you're coming back from a relapse. You'll want to measure. I did a fourth step when I was 24, and I continued to write resentments throughout my recovery of those 14 years until I stopped. But I wrote my first fourth step. I was telling you I was going weekly in writing these, but you complete your first fourth step. Let's put it that way. If we want to get like techie talk of AA, your first fourth step should consider all the resentments, fears, and harms of the act of addiction, childhood, and the completion of that act of addiction, stabilization. Moving forward, it's kind of 10, 11, and 12 are these steps you can never complete. We continue to take personal inventory. We improve. We seek to improve our conscious contact with God. We carry this message. These are things that you can't complete. They become a practice. But the 10th step could be written down. I mean, so I get resentments. I write down before I involve other people. I don't want to be out of control. I don't want to lose my ideals, my integrity. This is the magic of the fourth step. What you're writing down is, okay, you spent 30 days getting sober. The problem when you went to rehab in your mind was crystal meth, fentanyl, heroin, marijuana, or vodka. So these are your problems. 30 days later, you're starting to have the consideration that they weren't the problems. They were the symptom. They were my first cure to a prior problem. And the big book addresses this by saying, we find the matters of resentment and fear infinitely grave. They didn't say alcohol, gin. They said resentment and fear. This puts, when I attack these things on the fourth step, it puts the gate farther away from immediate impulse use. Now, instead of looking for obsessions to set me off for drinking or drug use, I'm looking for resentments and I'm looking for fear in my mind. This gets me a little more space between relapse of use. I'm identifying addiction's prior condition farther down the road than just the impulse of pulling over and relapsing. So that's the trick that's kind of happening in the fourth step. I'm seeing where addiction is cognitively. What time is it? Ooh, we got 2 more minutes. So, Justin, yeah, to your point, you're done when you do your fifth step, but sometimes you forget things. But we're going to see in step 6, you get a chance to think: did I leave something out? Was I still foggy? Did I not remember this the right way? You could go back and touch it up, and then meet with your sponsor again. Guys, there were some great questions. Thanks, Suzanne. Oh, homework. Thanks, Kiva. Okay, homework for next week. If you found a petty resentment, try to write it down in that simple way. I am resentful at Angus, the cause. This affects. Then go to the big book, page 69. Did I arouse jealousy or fear by not liking this person? What could I have done and said? Did I hurt anyone else? And consider these things. Come back next week with those ideas. And those who said they don't have a sponsor yet, try to get 4 numbers and don't ask for a sponsor. Dude, try something. I'm just going to give a suggestion for the week. Go to a meeting. If you like what someone shares this week, if you don't have a sponsor, go up and ask them, hey, have you worked the steps? And if they said yes, say, would you be able to show me or take me through them? I was just on a workshop and I have a feeling I could, really be helped by writing a fourth step. See where the discussion goes. Don't put the title of sponsor on them right away. Ask them if they could take you through the steps. See what they say. And next week we'll be ready to do the fifth step and see what that's about. What it's really about. What it says in AA. What its considerations are in NA. Guys, thank you so much again. I hope this is a help. If you need anything, reach out to me. It's joe.vanwee@avenuesrecovery.com. I'll see you guys next week. Thank you so much. Angus.